Welcome back, everybody. Aaron's High Cap Adventure Radio Program, December 8, 2018. And
Had to get a water break.
Attorney Extraordinaire Benton Ross Watson is in with us, and we're going over the
Like a whiskey
NFA,
break.
National Firearms Act, and the GCA, the Gun Control Act of 1968. So, Ross, now that you got your breath, why don't you start from the beginning, buddy?
Oh, so you're talking about gun control. I think other than starting at the Second Amendment, I think you can start in 1927 and kind of go from there. And it really gives you a picture, an idea about how back and forth our country has been about this issue. This is nothing new. Okay, and so it all started in 1927. They did a non-mailable gun act where just made it illegal, actually prevented the Postal Service from shipping guns through the mail. Well, then you have John Dillinger in his Roadhouse hideout have the big shootout with the FBI and several law enforcement offices. And so from there, Congress goes in to pass the National Firearms Act. Okay, and they essentially, and you see the beauty of what the presidents did and what they do now. Right? They use like an administrative agency, okay, such as the Internal Revenue Service, okay, or some other administrative body that's a part of the executive, okay, to try to get around, right, the regulations of the Constitution, right, or, the parts that limit the government's authority. And so that's exactly what they did, and it was part of the Revenue Service. So what it did is it made an excise tax, okay, on ownership of certain kinds of weapons, and they were concerned, obviously, with the machine guns, right, and the short barrel shotguns, short barrel firearms. What we have now is any other weapon, essentially those pistols that would fall into one of those categories, but don't really fall into one of those categories. And so what they did was they had you actually register those kinds of weapons and pay an excise tax. Now, you talk about the amount of money we pay today, and I don't know, what is it, $200?
It's $200. I was going to make that comment. Yeah, back then.
So $200, and you gotta. This has been like the same amount of money since then.
Yep.
Okay, and so today $200 is not really that huge of an investment. When you talk about $200 in 1934, I mean, how much was a house? I don't know, $10,000?
I don't know, but that $200 was a tremendous amount of money for the purpose they didn't want people buying it.
I mean, it'd be like making at least a $2,500 to $5,000 investment,
Probably, yeah.
just for that, just to have the weapon registered with the National Firearms Act. So the whole point is if we get them registered, this makes gangsters, right? This sort of deters gangsters from wanting to get it, and if we have this really expensive tax requirement, right, and it's really not a tax, right? It's more like a fee, right? It sounds more like a fee than it is a tax. But there's a way that the government structures these things where they end up getting it as a tax, and so therefore it falls under the Internal Revenue Code, and therefore they can exercise their executive powers, not powers that otherwise would fall subject to the Constitution. So this is what they did, and so the tax requirement would have reduced the number of people that would have had these weapons. So they feel like they were knocking two birds out with one stone, so to speak. Well, then they came back in 1938 and they made the Federal Firearms Licensing Act. Okay, and so in order to sell and be a dealer of firearms, so it's being engaged in the business of selling firearms, you had to get a federal license to do that, and manufacturers as well had to get a federal license to do that, and they had to follow a whole bunch of record-keeping requirements, and it gave, right, what was then the miscellaneous tax unit or something like that, which is now the ATF. It gave that body, okay, regulating authority. And so what that means is that they essentially, other than a few broad guidelines by the Constitution and then by Congress, they make their own rules.
That sounds just real nice, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so and this is kind of what happened. Before I go there, and so then in 1939 we have the case that is still controversial to this day. Each side uses it to say that it advances the other side's proposition. When who knows what it did, but it certainly got the ball rolling for the anti-gun, this is not a constitutional right point of view, because in Miller versus the United States, United States versus Miller, I probably have it mixed up, but it's kind of interesting. I haven't read any actual biographies, but you can read several online posts about it, and several legal forums too, that what happened here is essentially he got caught with a firearm, and so he challenged the portion of the National Firearms Act, right, being unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. But like I said, if you go read the backstory on all this, which I actually haven't read anything that's like peer-reviewed, scientific or anything like that, but there's a lot of stories about it. It makes me think that it has a lot of truth to it. That it was basically an inside setup with the judge even knowing exactly what was going to happen.
That's a very delicate phrase, inside job. A lot of people say things about that on other things too. So.
Well, I was saying, inside setup means it was all sort of arranged with the parties involved knowing what was about to take place and intending for it to take place in the manner that it did. Okay, and so nothing necessarily crooked or wrongful, but
I want to back you up on that, because look, I was looking this up here. If this is all accurate, just what you said, how it goes through so smoothly in the sense of it was like all prearranged. Check this out. The NFA House bill was presented on May of 28, 1934. The committee consideration, it was sent to the House Ways and Means Committee. It was passed on the House on June 13th, 1934, passed by the Senate on the 18th, and then signed by the President on June 26th. Okay? That is super fast. So what you're just saying there about people's all coordinated, they plan this stuff.
Well, that act was planned. I mean, you got to remember what's going on in that time period. You have Prohibition going on in that time period. You have how many different gangsters at that time are being put in a national theater, right, out in radio. All kinds of things are being put out there
almost becoming heroes
almost in that respect in some parts of the country, right? And the government needed to do something and needed to act swiftly.
I think there's another thing too, and I did not know this. In 1933, I think it was, President-elect FDR had assassination attempt on him. Did you know about that?
I'm sure I knew.
There was a guy in there, Gillespie, I believe his name was. He shot 5 rounds or 6 rounds, and 5 people were hit, and FDR wasn't. So using that, trying to attempt to assassinate a president, that's another key.
What you're going to see later, we're going to see that again. We're going to see that We're going to see that happen 2 more times.
With Kennedy and all that, yeah.
Okay, and so, but as far as the Miller case, very very interesting story. That essentially everybody knew that he had flipped on some of his gangster buddies, right, and was going to go into hiding, right, as soon as he makes this challenge or gets his case dealt with. And so he makes the challenge against the National Firearms Act, right, and the judge upholds it, okay, at the state level, the judge decides in favor with Miller, saying that it's unconstitutional in the Second Amendment. That gives the state, right, the government, in this instance, the right to appeal, right, to go against what the judge said, right? And everybody knew that by the time it got back, if they won on appeal, which they probably would, because Miller wasn't going to challenge it, because he would have gone into hiding, okay, because he had flipped on his buddies, okay, by the time it made it back, he'd be long gone and it wouldn't matter anyway. Right. And so that's essentially what happened at the Supreme Court level, because they go to the Supreme Court and they have nobody to challenge. There's nobody, right? And so they make this challenge, and the judges and Miller even are clear, which has been a disputed point in other cases and has been a disputed point in other advocates' arguments, right, back and forth, is because the judges say there being no evidence here for us to consider, and there being nothing else for us to consider on the other side, and we can't take judicial notice of a factual issue, and there being nothing presented for us to look at, then we have no reason other than to decide in favor of the government. And so there was nobody to challenge that case, and so they win that case on the fact that they said, look, we're an administrative body. We're exercising an executive function, a part of the Internal Revenue Service. It's a lawful excise tax, right? The Second Amendment's for a well-regulated militia, and there's no evidence that this weapon, right, has any reasonable relation to being used as part of the state militia, right? And the court said, that's right. There's nobody presenting any evidence. There's nobody saying otherwise, so we agree. Okay, and
By
so
default.
essentially, right, and so gun rights activists used that to say the court obviously, right, made it clear that the Second Amendment applies. There just wasn't any evidence of a militia in this case, right? But if they had been presented that, this would have been a different story. Whereas, the anti-camp says, look, the Second Amendment means we can regulate. It still means we can regulate at the state level. And so it really started the ball rolling on those ambiguous, right, interpretations, which all started from probably some defense lawyer working out some kind of deal. but anyway, probably didn't realize that it was going to have that much impact. Or maybe they did. Maybe that was the prosecutor. Maybe the prosecutor was looking. There's a short-term battle and a long-term war. Maybe the prosecutor was looking at this long-term, and so this is what happened. And true enough, well, at least from what I read, that Miller ended up dead before they even made it back to court. And so I guess the National Firearms Act didn't regulate his buddies too good.
Didn't do a good job, did it?
And so then we go, but moving forward. So then we move into. I'll just jump ahead to 1968, when we there's the assassination attempt on John F. Kennedy, and so we get the Gun Control Act, right, which is going to come in and try to regulate those weapons, okay, and it's going to make it a lot more. There's going to be a lot more regulations, strict regulations on transferring weapons. There's going to be a prohibition on some kinds of weapons, and then we're going to go forward right into the 1980s when the ATF, in regulating, right, and making its own regulations, gets a little out of hand.
You know what's funny about this? JFK gets shot supposedly with a Carcano rifle, a piece of junk rifle, okay, from a depository window, 3 shots in a moving vehicle, okay, and yet they ban or they put limits on all these other types of guns when this little piece of crap rifle started on. It's like, give me a break, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's government work. We're gonna sweep with a broad brush,
yeah,
okay, to tackle things that are specific, okay, and if you're in the Texas legislature, you're going to be way too specific and end up saying something that's not right, and end up tagging a lot more than you meant to. I'm just that's just a joke from our inside jokes from all our laws we talk about here. But going from the regulations with the ATF, we're getting out of hand. And so, like I said, they were essentially their own, and they are with these administrative bodies. I can tell you just from other levels of practice, I represent law enforcement officers every once in a while. In fact, in judicial review board, not in administrative review boards about use of force and whether they used it excessively or not, and whether it fell in line with the policies and procedures in which they were trained to use them. And even in the DWI context, when you talk about driver's licenses, right, and even in the context of getting your license to carry, these administrative bodies, I mean, it's just like I gotta tell my clients, it doesn't matter how good an argument I make factually, the facts I put on, I mean, you're gonna lose. It's a state office of administrative hearings. They say that these judges are impartial, and I'm not saying that they're not, and there's a lot of good judges up there. But the fact is, they're up there in the same building, they're up in the same town. It's essentially that court.
Deals
those courts
made,
are
man.
set
Deals
up by the agency. It's by that part of the executive office. I mean, it's just. I mean, they deal with.
What gets me, Ross? What gets me is there's a sliver of potential necessity for all these rules and regulations, okay? But the rest of it is somebody's agenda. Why do they want this so restricted? I can see, because people are back in the gangster days, okay, everybody's shooting machine guns. I can understand the thought process, although I don't agree with it. I can understand why they would come around things. But like I said, there's a sliver of truth of what you could go on, but there's people with agendas. Why do they do this? And a lot of people will say it's because people who don't have guns don't have control. And the ones that are in control are able to easily manipulate, maneuver, or do whatever they have to those who are not armed and able to defend themselves. So I mean, it's this big twisted thing. So when you're talking about these people up in the higher offices talking, there's got to be some agenda, don't you think?
I mean, there's not. I don't think everybody, even every politician from that standpoint, has that agenda. I don't think. Again, there's a lot of, like I always talk about.
They
this.
don't, but they got their own agenda, and the people who have more power say, "Look,
exactly.
you want that agenda to go, you got to follow my agenda."
Yes, and so I feel like a lot of times there's a shooting, and then there's emotion involved, right? That emotion gets transferred onto some politician or somebody in the power that has power over a politician, right? Because these people are crying to them to do something,
right?
Okay, and I think that has a lot to do with recently in the view and the social opinions.
It's basically, you want it done, kiss the ring. That's basically what it ends up being. I'm serious, man. You got people who want to do the right things or get certain things done, but the people above say, well, kiss the ring and I'll do this and that and we'll get done what you want to get done, but kiss the ring, submit to me.
Like I said, that definitely happens. I don't think that's everybody's viewpoint. Okay, I think that some people aren't even educated about all the facts, which is what we spoke about on here before.
That's
I think
what we
that
try to do here is
there's facts skewed a lot of times, but and that's like what we see as soon as there's an assassination attempt, we have a lobby for more gun control. And so
I always tell people, hey, look, they ask me how long does it take to get your license to carry? I said, well, depending on any terrorist attacks, it should be about 3 weeks.
Well, look, some of these are really debatable. I mean, some of these things are legitimate laws, I think. Some of them are legitimate.
Well, that's what I said, a sliver of it. But
some of them are legitimate, okay?
Give me one.
What do you mean, give you one? Well, I mean, I think we should have machine guns regulated to a certain degree.
I can't. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I mean, I think we should have machine guns regulated to a certain degree. And then how could you even say, how could you even have the mental defect argument? I mean, obviously, at some degree, we've got to have some level of control. Okay, maybe you've either, in my opinion, got to have some control or no control. There's got to be absolutely none, which means that if I'm allowed to carry whatever I want, and if anybody gets froggy, I'm allowed to shoot first and ask questions later.
Yeah.
Okay, and so otherwise you'd have people that really are highly. I mean, somebody that could barely even speak because they have such a mental defect, being able to have a weapon without a problem. I think so. There's got to be a certain level of regulation, but I think one of them that's a big debate right now. Well, I didn't even get to make it. So we moved from '68, then in the '80s, okay, in early '90s, and right before the Brady Bill, we have a big push because there's over regulation by the ATF, and so they come in the Gun Owners Protection Act and things like that, and they kind of deregulate the ATF. Then James Brady gets shot with the Reagan, with what's going on with Reagan, and they come up with the Brady Bill, okay, which makes it illegal to have certain weapons. We got to do more background checks. It establishes the NICS instant background checks, which was good in some way because it was instant. Mm-hmm. There wasn't this 5-day requirement, right? Then we have it where we're trying to off limit assault weapons. There's an assault weapons ban that comes up, right? Then that expires in 2004. Bush passes, right, the basically, which is essentially a gun manufacturer protection act, okay? And you also have the TART, right, amendment. And so I don't know where I stand on the TART amendment. And the TART amendment is that would keep the ones who sell firearms that are used in violent crimes, right, sell those things illegally, essentially.
Clarify that.
Sell them involved in a violent crime. Those who sell firearms to those who use the firearms in a legal manner in a violent crime, okay, they can't disclose the names of those individuals.
The person who sold the firearm.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
see, here's the thing, though.
I see both sides of this viewpoint, and the viewpoint from the strong anti or gun control lobby is that before this amendment, the public knew who these major sellers were because there was evidence that only 5 to 10%, right? It came down to the same dealers every time, so to speak. There was a large amount of the guns that were sold in violent crimes that were coming from the same dealer.
Well, that could be just logistics. But when you have NICS checks, though, that takes the burden off of the dealer because he's doing everything supposedly that the feds say to do. The background check checks the personnel and it falls to them. The only problem is the mental issue, because the mental issue, and we saw that from the military forces where they failed to supply information to NICS and all that kind of stuff. So people who may be looking great have a mental defect that's been known, but they didn't stop. And how's the dealer going to know? You know, so he's just doing according to what the regs are, and he sells a gun in good faith. So nothing should come back to the dealer.
And that's why I said I see both sides. I see why each side says that they don't. But if there was real evidence that let's say you could trace, 20%, which would be a high number, very high number, of all of these instances to one dealer, there's something going on. I mean, this guy obviously has a problem that other dealers don't have. I mean, it's one thing to have a one-time transaction that, like when they were using San Antonio at the school shooting, to get the guy sold his farm.
Look, I didn't think you were coming in. Thought something happened, so we're going to play guilty unless innocent unless proven guilty. It's the same thing with this guy who's selling 20% of the guns to the people who are causing all the problems.
Well, he's not convicted of any crime. It's just releasing his name. So right now, that amendment makes it completely confidential. It's absolutely confidential. There's no way you can get the information at all. And I don't know how I feel about that. What if you have somebody that's out there really that's involved, like that just is technically like skirting illegal transfers every time, but is really promoting.
I thought you're talking about not goes out to the public. Doesn't mean that internal affairs can't check it out and see.
That's true. That's true. But the sphere of public opinion on something like that is huge. They could kill that person's business and prevent them from making the rest of us look bad. And so I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying I don't know where I stand. I see both sides' argument. I think that's one regulation that could maybe be expounded upon a little bit. Maybe it could be touched upon. But I do see why those names need to be confidential. I see why it would be unfair to target those individuals for a one, maybe even two transactions that they had no control over.
And let me just be clear, ladies and gentlemen, it's neither Ross nor I are coming up with this or that or saying in favor of this or in favor of that. We're simply saying there's these things out there that exist, NFA, GAC, or
Gun Control Act.
Thank you. And all these different elements that are involved. All we're doing is bringing them into the spotlight here so you can make your own debate. The number is 254-697-6633 if you want to add a comment or two.
I mean, it's not like it's just super easy to get public information anyway. It's not. I mean, trust me. I just sent in a request to the DMV for information. It's supposed to be 10-day requirement under FOIA, under the Texas Public Information Act, and I mean, I'm still waiting. I mean, it's not like something easy. You still got to make the request. You got to deal with some kind of government administrative official that deals with the public every day. Is not in a good mood. I mean, it's not just like it's the easiest information to get, even if there was a way to get it. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like, what I'm saying is it's not like everybody's going to do it, but reporters would get it and reporters would misuse it. And so I see why that's one reason why they have that amendment.
A lot of this stuff, though, when I'm looking at the rules and the regs, and then you see what is allowed, it's almost like this minute little difference between topic A and topic B. It's like, come on, give me a break.
When you go look at the regs from the ATF, yeah, there's two back-to-back opinions from them about paintball.
What?
Guns, and we've spoke about it on here before, and I don't remember the exact.
Yeah, but I got a brain like a Sid. That's why I have videos. I rewatch.
It talks about they talk about the paintball guns, and so it's like changing one little aspect of this paintball gun could make it.
Just like an AR-15. If you don't have a bayonet lug on it, it wasn't an assault rifle. You put a little chunk of metal on the front of the sight post. Is that for us? All right, we got a call. Let's see who we got on the air. Welcome to the show. What's your name? What's the topic?
Is laws and crime, and I know you guys, the debate is always on, the guns, who should have them, who not, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Guns aren't bad until they're in the hands of criminals or people who break laws. Okay?
That's correct.
So the problem we have here is we have a lot of people that do that, and the punishment is not strong enough. I'm talking about the habitual criminals. They're the ones that are causing the problems on breaking laws and with guns. So when these habitual criminals, we need legislation that says, here's how you address this. You know, they had something similar to it in the three-strike law here a few years ago. But when you do that and you lock them up for a long time, those taxpayers are still having to foot the bill for them. And I really don't want to do that. And the fact of the matter is, if they are an habitual criminal, we have no need for them in society anyway. Why can't we give them the death penalty? Why do us taxpayers have to keep funding people? Really? Why do us taxpayers have to keep funding criminals who continually commit crimes? When you put some teeth in your laws to where they're scared of it, okay, then we won't have that. So if y'all want to discuss that, I guess I can go.
That's an interesting perspective, and
no, really, your law. If you're going to have laws to where people obey them, they have to have a fear of breaking the law. There's no fear of that today.
Well, I agree with that. There's a I don't know how to say it, but the criminals out there really they don't care too much. They just do it anyway, and it's a difficult situation. And I'm disappointed that you called now. I wish you called earlier because I'm going to have to cut this segment off.
That's those dang defense lawyers making it.
I'll tell you what.
Why don't we get together next week?
Well, maybe we'll touch on that next week, and we'll just discuss the pros and cons of being aggressive with the law and being lax with the law, like you've just discussed.
I mean, there's all kinds of. The first thing we do, yeah. I mean, the first thing I'm going to ask in a jury trial is, can my jurors consider, right, the full range of punishment, meaning even the lesser, right? And so if you tell me no, and you want the full max range, if they've committed this third or fourth habitual crime, if you tell me no, I can't consider the full range, I'm going to ask that you be struck, and the judge is probably going to strike you. And so what I'm going to be looking for from the defense standpoint is I'm going to be trying to get people like you out of there, right? And that's exactly what happens. And I would say that you have a pre-existing bias, right, towards the system. So if you really want to get one of these people, you better not answer honestly and voir dire. Don't do that. Don't do that.
I'll tell you what. Let's touch on this next week because we got to stop this.
And if you're in my case, please answer honestly.
Okay. Look, I appreciate you calling. Appreciate you listening. Stay tuned for next week, and we'll touch on this early in the segment, and we can maybe discuss a little bit more. So thanks for the call, Ross. We got to cut this segment short. So tell everybody how they can get a hold of you.
105 East Main Street here in Camry. If you want to come holler at me, we love taking ideas and stuff. I actually got 2 emails this week. I'm going to get back to you. I promise. It was a crazy week this week. I'm going to do it this weekend. But if you do, email me. Leave me your phone number because sometimes I don't have a chance to email you back. Mm-hmm. Also, if you want to make an appointment, you can also call me at 254-605-4140. That's 254-605-4140. I appreciate Rick Dodd. And you guys for having me on. So
all right, Rick, thanks again for sponsoring the program, and Ross, thanks for coming on and talking about it. And let's take a break, a 1 minute break. Get me back on in about a minute, and we're going to do an opinion piece real quick, then get Janae Goodman on, and then the chief, the voice of law enforcement. Ross, thanks again. See you on the other side.